The Alliance and the Horde have been at each other's throats since the dawn of Warcraft. From Warcraft 1 to Battle for Azeroth, they have constantly had the need to and the drive to engage in warfare. I did a video a long time ago about why the factions couldn't get along, and while making that video, I had the idea for a different one. What if the factions had a long-lasting peace? What if, let's say, the two, after the defeat of Garrosh, decided to set aside their differences and work together? What would change? How would the two differ from their current states today? Well, if you think it would change the course of modern WoW history, you are wrong. Things and events would still happen, as they don't necessarily involve the Alliance and Horde going to war. For example, Garrosh would still return to the past and create the Iron Horde. The Legion would still invade at the behest of Gul'dan. Vol'jin and Varian would still likely die, and a sword would still be plunged into Azeroth. But there are things that would still differ. One of the big changes in this timeline, the one that would affect the outcome of everything, is how the factions would respond to peace. There's a lot to cover in this video, but before I can get into what the factions would look like if peace was the method of diplomacy, we need to set the stage. We'll start at the Horde. The Horde, well, if the Horde strived for peace with the Alliance, they would have needed to change the way they are ruled. As it stood since the original Horde, you have the War Chief, who is essentially a dictator of what the faction does, and then you have everyone else. Now, because of their history, because they strive for what their predecessors never did, this method of leadership would have to change significantly. So in this time, let's say, after Garrosh was defeated, Vol'jin decides to be a smart war chief and break up his power because he was one of the ones that suffered the most under the power of an unhinged war chief. In his place, the Horde would form a council, much like it does after the events of BFA. By doing this, they ensure that no one leader of the Horde has more power than another. Together, chosen representatives of each race will come together and decide on what best interests their diverse populations. I shouldn't have to tell you how big of a change that would be, as if we look to the future in this time, Vol'jin, now a representative of the Darkspear and not war chief, would die, and Sylvanas wouldn't be able to rise to power because she is already in the same position as everyone else, and her schemes wouldn't be as effective. Of course, Rokhan would also come to represent the Darkspear in Vol'jin's place. And that brings us to the Alliance, which, oh boy, out of the two, the Alliance would probably change the most. You see, the Grand Alliance was founded on several distinct principles. The Horde exists because they saw a need to survive in a hostile environment. The Alliance didn't need that. They have the goods needed to survive, they have the numbers needed to defend their borders, and they have technology that vastly outweighs their counterpart. So in place of their basic needs, the Alliance holds close ideals that they believe make them differ from the Horde. They believe in nobility, they believe in honor, faith, justice, and sacrifice. Those ideals are upheld because, to the Alliance, the Horde is a beacon of none of them. The Horde isn't what you strive to be. The Alliance is what you strive to be. And so, a peace that would last longer than 5 minutes would completely shake the foundations of the entire Alliance. Imagine being a citizen of Stormwind. One day, your leaders preach about how the Horde is savage, filthy, nasty, and deserving of nothing. Then the next, there's a peace and an attempt at a lasting one. You see ambassadors of the Horde, orcish savages, and cannibal trolls wandering your city streets. To you, to those around you, your Alliance, the faction that has strived to be nothing like the Horde, has now elevated the faction to an equal. There would be unrest, racial tension, and discrimination if borders were opened. Depending on how widespread the unrest was, leaders like Genn and the Night Elves, both who have suffered at the hands of the Horde in places like Gilneas and Ashenvale, might even turn their backs on the faction like Tyrande did in BFA. Then if Varian were to perish on the Broken Shore, only to have Ryn's peace-loving son ascend to the throne, unrest might grow into another rendition of the Defias or something much worse. Overall, peace between the factions would radically shift the Alliance, as the Horde would only grow stronger by their need to survive. Don't get me wrong, The Horde might face some issues the Alliance would, but they wouldn't be nearly as bad or as widespread. If you don't believe me, I invite you to read up on what happened to the Alliance of Lordaeron, or go wander around Stormwind and Morales and see how the people of the Alliance feel about a possibility of peace with their mortal enemy. So if peace was maintained until 33 years after the Dark Portal, the year of the Blood War, the Alliance might be on the verge of collapse, like the Alliance of Lordaeron before it, and the Horde would be thriving. This would be occurring around the same time as the Azeroth crisis, which, if there is peace, wouldn't spark a war, but a coalition of people banding together to try and heal the planet. As for other events that have happened as of recent, as for the Kultirans and the Zandalari, they would probably remain neutral, as would most other allied races besides a select few, like the Lightforged or the High Mountain Tauren. N'Zoth would most likely remain in his prison, but I do see Azshara as a larger threat, especially because the naval powers of the Alliance and the Horde are still drastically weakened as of 33 ADP. And then we get to Sylvanas, who still strives to keep herself alive by any means necessary. There are two outcomes when it comes to her. Either she tries to instill a war between the forces of the old gods and the factions to benefit them all, or she simply bides her time. Regardless, I don't think there would be a rush for her to open the veil between life and death, so long as she is never found out like she was in our time. We'd still journey into the Shadowlands probably, but not any time soon. But of course, that and everything here is just a thought. We don't really know what would happen if there was a long-lasting peace between the Alliance and the Horde, but maybe, just maybe, you have your own thoughts, which you can leave along with any and all questions, comments, or concerns regarding this video, Warcraft, or its lore, in the comment section down below, and I'll be sure to read each and every one of them. Thanks for watching.